At first glance, you might have thought it was a major catastrophe. Dozens of members of the SWAT team, Boca Police, and Fire Rescue armed outside of the Boca Raton Housing Authority Wednesday morning.
They were handing out applications for Section 8 housing, and they got a larger turnout than they expected.
Since early 2002, the U.S. dollar has lost about a third of its value against other major world currencies. Some market watchers see an even more precipitous drop in the dollar's future. One of those men, Peter Schiff. He's the founder and president of Euro-Pacific Capital and author of Crash Proof: How to Profit from the Coming Economic Collapse. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Strong words, economic collapse. What's collapsing and when's it going to happen? Why?
Well, I think the dollar is going to collapse, and with it, basically the American standard of living and the way of life that we all are accustomed to.
A year ago, Ben Bernanke, the head of the Fed, Hank Paulson, head of the Treasury, even the president said the subprime crisis was going to be contained. There are 9 million houses about underwater right now. That's not subprime, and experts say that that number could easily double. That 15 to 20 million houses could be underwater in a year or two. That's not contained. So,
because there's been a lot of concern expressed here today on both sides of the aisle about the kind of financial trouble we're in, and there's no doubt about that.
He's David Tice, founder and fund manager at David Tice and Associates, and joining us from Dallas this morning. Hi, good morning there, David.
Glad to be here.
Well, before we get to your very certain predictions on recession, I do want to get your reaction to what's going on in the markets right now. What is really driving investors right now to sell, or is it just momentum selling going on?
Well, we think there is a recognition, Betty, that there's been a train wreck right in front of our house and that they're carrying the bodies out.
Here's what John Williams at shadowstats.com says about what's coming down the road.
Where are we going? We have a severe recession ahead of us with even higher inflation than we're seeing now. It's going to be probably the worst business cycle seen since the Great Depression.
1929. The financial house of cards collapses, and the overinflated stock market plunges into a Great Depression. A financial panic grips the world.
A bad situation here when OPEC says the reason for $105 or $106 a barrel oil is the falling value of the dollar, and you won't address that issue. Where do we go to find out who's right?
Well, as he just said, the Treasury Secretary is where you go to talk about the dollar. It's a long-standing policy that predates this administration, and I'm not going to change it today. But Treasury can talk about it.
I don't expect you to change it, but I do expect you to be able to say whether OPEC is completely wrong about this, or whether there is at least something to their claim that the dollar is responsible for the high price of oil right now.
Wendell, I'm under strict instructions and have been from the beginning to not talk about the dollar, and I'm not going to get fired to satisfy your question.
I expect that.
Kathleen.
Chairman Bernanke, earlier you were asked a question about the value of the dollar, and you sort of deferred and said, that's the Treasury responsibility. I always find this so fascinating because it's been going on for years. Your predecessor would always use that as an excuse to not talk about the value of the dollar. But here I find the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who's in charge of the dollar, in charge of the money, in charge of what the money supply is going to be. But we don't deal with the value of the dollar. But you do admit you have a responsibility for prices. But how can you separate the two? Prices are a mere reflection of the value of the dollar. If you want to control prices, then you have to know the value of the dollar. But if you're going to avoid talking about the dollar, then all you can do then is deal with central economic planning. If we stimulate the economy, maybe there'll be production and prices will go down.
It's a bad time for stocks. It's a bad time for bonds because of the higher inflation and what's going to be weakness in the dollar. That will tend to push the long-term rates higher, pressing down on bond prices.
Sell stocks.
Very simple. Cash. You want to be liquid, you want to be safe, and I'd hold a little bit of gold as a hedge against inflation.
In Japan, France, Britain, always the unemployed, the soup kitchens, the grinding poverty, and the despair.
You know what, Robert Shiller at Yale University, the famous economics professor up there who does the Case-Shiller report,
Sure.
Amazingly, he says the same thing. So does Nuriel Robini over at NYU, saying the same thing. These aren't a bunch of kooks. These are guys who are educated. These are guys who are looking far out into the economy that say, look out, there's a big pie coming in your face. Ellie.
A near riot broke out in Fresno early this morning where hundreds had gathered outside a Best Buy waiting for it to open. When the store announced they only had 34 PlayStation game systems, the crowd charged. 2 arrests were made, people were trampled, but no serious injuries. Not so lucky was Craig Weston.
I lay on the ground, I'm getting trampled.
He was sent to the hospital with a dislocated jaw and bruised face. His head was thrown into this flagpole while fighting a crowd of 50 outside a Wisconsin Walmart for a place in line.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
It was a human drama with emotions and tensions running high. Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. And they said, let us in.
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'm saying, look at all my food. I got plenty of food. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, it's not even loaded. And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun?
Well, they punched me in the face. Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me. They dragged me out of here. I really thought they were going to kill me.
The scenario was a fake, but the pepper spray and billy clubs used to break up this riot were definitely real.
Send your IDs ready up for the
I got 5 I need pampers, diapers, milk.
Okay, these guys have plastic handcuffs available. You see it in the gentleman's mouth right there. He's got a plastic handcuff. These are handcuffs that are used to control dissidents. You see he's turning it into a handcuff by looping one through the other. And they'll be used to put on.
Do you have some way to quarter or corral these folks?
Yeah, that's another great question. I've got to tell you that in an actual environment, we would work very, very closely with local government.
Take a gander at this new piece of Army gear. It's new. It looks harmless enough, right? Well, but it can light up like a Roman candle. Check that out. It's a crowd buster, a non-lethal way to take the fight out of an angry crowd. Watch it in action. Okay, well, these are volunteers, we hope, and you and I call it a heat ray. The Army calls it an active denial system. Millimeter waves that make you feel like your skin is on fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
That woman lives there. Maybe her children are asleep. Saying, hey, they're going in there. I'm going to go in and rescue my kids, right? In the past, that might be interpreted as a hostile act. One of the technologies that work makes you nauseous. In the past, in a situation like that, she might have been shot. In the future, we want to give our Marines non-lethal options where they can say, no, she's not armed, maybe threatening, but I don't want to kill her, or I don't want to kill him, or them. Use your sound wave rifle, I guess you could call it, and down they go. If this was a domestic crisis like an earthquake or a fire, then we would be working very, very close and hand in hand with FEMA and the American Red Cross, for example. And they would be in here helping us, or we would be actually helping them.
If we were doing this, let's say in a Somalia or a Bangladesh or some other foreign country that had invited us in, then certainly we would be working with other non-governmental organizations and private organizations and certainly government organizations.
Internationally, like the United Nations?
Certainly. You bet. We would really be here to provide support to them.